On this Sunday night, ER crowding and closures across Canada. A fragile system in the fray has staff sounding the alarm.
It took me like almost 12 hours to even get a bed.
What the pressure on hospitals means for patients. Harrowing heat. Wildfires rage in France and Spain as heat waves sear Europe. Battling an upcoming ban.
Dogs will literally suffer and die.
The Canadians fighting to save helpless and homeless canines in foreign countries. And she's an ace on the greens.
As an Indigenous Two-Spirit woman, I do feel a lot of pride.
One golfer's path from traumatic childhood to champion.
Global National with Farah Nasser. Reporting tonight, Neetu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. It is situation critical in Canada's emergency rooms. Understaffed hospitals are getting overwhelmed with patients. The pandemic pushed facilities to the brink, burning out doctors and nurses. Those who stayed behind are now pleading for action. In tonight's top story, Abigail Bimman looks at how patients are suffering, the growing challenges, and the deadly consequences.
Almost 12 hours to even get a bed. 12 hours, right? And it was a terrible scene. Terrible pain.
Gallstone sent Nirav Vora to an Ontario hospital in an ambulance 3 weeks ago. He stayed there for 5 days until he could get his gallbladder out.
A lack of internal medicine doctors. Oh my God, it was terrible. It's not priority.
He knows he's not alone. A critical staffing shortage is fueling emergency room wait times and even closures across the country. After a man died waiting in a Fredericton ER, New Brunswick's premier shuffled out his health minister, fired a health network CEO, and cleared out 2 boards.
This is simply unacceptable and just the latest example of the crisis we're facing in our healthcare system.
And rural communities are left not getting the Canadian dream of equal access to emergency care 24/7 basis. And so there's something really morally wrong with what's happening.
Emergency room physician Dr. Alan Drummond wishes Ontario leadership would be more vocal like New Brunswick. His Perth Hospital's ER is closed for 3 weeks.
We have cottagers and tourists and music festivals and that kind of thing. And so traditionally, this is our busy time. And so this is the absolute wrong time for rural hospitals to be closed, and including my own.
One of several unique challenges for rural ERs, with a growing number forced to close nationwide.
Yesterday, we had a temporary service reduction, which goes from 3 p.m. to 7 a.m. our hospital, and everybody gets diverted to Port Hardy for emergencies. I got an email this morning that said Port Hardy is now closed from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. So that's concerning to me.
A few weeks ago, when we started talking about the healthcare system collapsing, this is what we meant. Real, tangible situations where Canadians aren't getting care.
While the premiers push the feds for more healthcare dollars, the Canadian Medical Association says it's no help debating who is responsible for what, but time to come up with solutions.
We're working on a tightrope here, and I think it's starting to fail in many places.
And no question, staff shortages is not a quick problem to solve. Dr. Smart says we should focus on retention for the workers still on the job, facing a series of challenges. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
Hospitals in the U.S. also facing challenges, a surge in people coming down with COVID-19. But it's not exactly like the previous upticks of this pandemic. As Jennifer Johnson reports, doctors are seeing more patients infected with monkeypox.
In the middle of summer, when infections of COVID-19 are usually low, a new variant, BA.5, is sweeping across America. The number of new infections is skyrocketing, but experts say cases are severely underreported as more people use at-home tests or don't test at all.
There's over 100,000 cases on average being reported on a daily basis. We're probably detecting 1 in 10 infections right now, so it's probably more like 1 million.
The latest surge is hitting Americans from New England to California. Officials in Massachusetts are urging people to wear masks again in indoor public settings. Cases of COVID-19 have shot up nearly 40% in Boston in a week. In San Diego, an indoor mask mandate for summer school takes effect Monday. Doctors warn there is little protection against this new strain.
This is a version of the virus that can escape any of the immunity you had from an infection previously, as well as from a vaccine. It poses a risk for a majority of the population.
Health experts say vaccines still protect against severe disease, hospitalization, and death, but there are concerns about what repeated COVID infections are doing to patients.
Each time you get reinfected, that's another chance for the virus to cause lots of different problems.
While federal health officials deal with this latest COVID-19 wave, cases of monkeypox are dramatically surging too. Patients desperate for vaccines are waiting in long lines from San Francisco to New York as demand for the shots far outstrips supply.
We need more vaccines, quickly.
The Centers for Disease Control is prioritizing vaccine distribution in hard-hit cities like New York, the epicenter of the virus. 3 vaccination centers opened there on Sunday, but only for one day due to the limited supply.
There's a total of approximately 4,200 appointments just for today.
Outbreaks of monkeypox are being reported in at least 43 states, while COVID-19 is surging in at least 39 states. A double challenge for federal health officials, racing to distribute more monkeypox vaccines while urging Americans to get another COVID-19 booster shot. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Out-of-control wildfires in southern Europe are forcing thousands of people from their homes. Drought and rugged hilly terrain are just a couple of factors making it difficult for firefighters to douse the flames. People living in Spain, Portugal, and France are now also battling record-breaking heat linked to more than 1,000 deaths. Mike Armstrong reports tonight on what else firefighters are up against.
This is an earlier fire season than usual for Spain, and it's been brutal. As crews battle dozens of wildfires, thousands of people are being forced to flee.
We've just grabbed a few essentials and just ran, really.
Spanish authorities say more than 46 square kilometers have been scorched in just the last 4 days. For firefighters, fatigue is a problem. For the public, it's the stress. This evacuee says it felt like the helicopters were on top of her. Then there's the loss. This couple's family farm was completely burned, they say. In France, more than 14,000 people have been forced out of their homes. 1,200 firefighters are trying to control multiple fires. Several regions are under an official red alert, and climate change is being blamed. Much of the country had a drier than usual winter, followed by a drier than usual spring. Now the French junior environment minister says they're having a particularly hot summer and forests are being devastated. They're having some of the same problems in Italy as well. Some regions are experiencing extreme drought conditions, their worst water crisis in more than 70 years. Meanwhile, the UK, already in a heat wave, is getting even hotter. The Meteorological Office has issued its first ever red extreme heat warning. It covers much of England and Wales and is now being extended to southern Scotland. People are being told not to travel unless they have to, and a national emergency has been declared.
This is serious heat that could actually ultimately end in people's death because it is so ferocious.
The highest temperature ever recorded in the UK was 38.7 degrees Celsius. It was in Cambridge 3 years ago. The forecast in that city for Monday is 40 degrees and a new record, but one that won't last. The forecast for Tuesday is even hotter, 41 degrees Celsius. Mike Armstrong, Global News.
Raging wildfires also threatening communities here in Canada. In northern Manitoba, most residents of the Matthias-Calome Cree Nation have now been able to escape a nearby inferno spanning 23,000 hectares. In BC, a fire near the burned-out village of Lytton has grown to 1,700 hectares. While high humidity is helping to dampen the flames, officials expect hot, dry, and windy weather to fuel the fire over the next few days. In response to a blistering 77-page report released today by the Texas House Committee investigating the Uvalde school shooting, the city's mayor has placed Lieutenant Mariano Pargas, who was acting police chief during the elementary school shooting, on administrative leave. The The committee highlighting a number of systemic failures in the police's slow, bungled response. Its report slams the nearly 400 local, state, and federal officers for ignoring their active shooter training and says they did not prioritize saving lives. The committee also blames the school district for not sticking to its safety plan and the gunman's family for failing to recognize the warning signs.
The report says if you're not willing to put the lives of the people you serve, of those children, before your own, in my view, you should find another job.
Back in May, the teen armed with an AR-15 stormed the school, shooting and killing 19 students and 2 teachers. It took more than an hour for officers to confront and kill the gunman. Ukraine's president has slashed the country's security service, firing the department's head and the prosecutor general, pointing to hundreds of criminal proceedings into treason. As Russia's war drags on, a 4-year-old Ukrainian girl killed by a missile attack has now been laid to rest. More than 100 people attended the funeral for Liza Dmitrieva. She, 2 boys, and at least 21 other people died Thursday when Russian cruise missiles struck the city of Vinnytsia. More than 200 others were injured, including Liza's mother, who's still in grave condition. Over in the Donetsk region, Russian forces have been unrelenting in their attacks on the port city of Mykolaiv. An industrial facility there was hit today. There's no word yet on casualties. According to the UN, more than 12 million people have fled Ukraine since Russia's war started nearly 6 months ago. Some have made their way to Canada. One family arrived here with just a suitcase. Jasmine Bala looks at the challenges they face now and the common bond they share with their new neighbors.
Every morning, she wakes up and checks her phone, fearful for those left behind.
Every day we are here by body, but every day we think about Ukraine.
Olga and her family were forced to flee Irpin during the early stages of the war.
We have no time to plan our journey, our trip to Canada.
They arrived in Canada on May 7th with the help of a friend and made Abbotsford their home.
I wanted to help Ukrainians because I'm Ukrainian, and it wasn't difficult because there were so many people that pitched in to help.
They're now living in a townhouse complex full of other Ukrainian families just like them.
Yes! Yes! Congratulations!
But the transition hasn't been easy.
We need to start our life from first step, because we have no anything.
And the hardest adjustment has been finding jobs like the ones they had in Ukraine.
For example, we have 3 teachers here, including Olga. They can't get education, they have to redo their certification. Or Olga's son, who is a physiotherapist in Ukraine, has to redo his certification and in order for him to get any kind of job.
It's been one obstacle after another for this Ukrainian family. But through it all, they've built a community.
And I'm so thankful for Canada people that I so welcoming.
Now 2 places they call home. Jasmine Bala, Global News.
Coming up, the dog rescue regulations catching Canadian animal advocates off guard. Wars and natural disasters don't have consequences for only humans. Animals are affected too. In recent years, more groups have been risking their lives to save dogs that are left homeless. But Canada is about to ban canines from certain countries. Mike Drolet explains why and how charitable groups are now chasing their tails to find a solution.
It is so hot today.
Rescuing dogs in foreign countries isn't cheap. Toronto-based charity Paws Across the Water ensures the dogs they take in are healthy, medically and otherwise, before putting them up for adoption here in Canada.
We're not in this for profit. We're in this to help dogs that would otherwise die or live terrible lives.
It's unclear how many like-minded charities are operating in Canada, but industry insiders agree they've seen more dogs arriving from the likes of Afghanistan, Ukraine, and China in recent years, like Syria before that. But 2 dogs, reportedly from Iran, were found to have rabies, prompting the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to issue a total ban of commercial dog imports from over 100 countries as of September 28th. A sudden decision that's caught animal advocates off guard.
And also it's not needed. I mean, the stats don't support it. So it's really puzzling and most concerning.
Oh, do you want this?
Dog behavioralist Brad Pattison, who's gone on dog rescues in multiple countries after natural disasters, says his concerns go beyond rabies.
As a behaviorist, I'm dealing with a plethora of problems that you typically would see maybe once every 2 or 3 months. Now I'm seeing every single week, maybe 3 or 4 times.
The problem, as he sees it, is that the industry isn't regulated. As rescue dogs become popular among conscientious pet owners, he sees the CFIA ban as a way to address potential fraud.
Start with a hard stop and then work with the organizations, the legitimate or rescue organizations, and from there you start to build it out.
That's exactly what the U.S. did, putting in a blanket ban before relaxing regulations through vaccinations, blood tests, and quarantines. It's the scenario lawyer Camille Lapchuk's hopes plays out in Canada.
This fight is just beginning. The stakes are too high. Dogs will literally suffer and die in even greater numbers than they are now on the streets in countries if the CFIA doesn't reverse course on this very poor decision.
So far, she says the CFIA, which didn't respond to inquiries from Global News, isn't talking. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
Ahead, the Canadian-made tools on the world's largest space telescope. NASA's James Webb telescope is the most powerful telescope ever built. It's given us Earthlings an unprecedented view of the universe, beaming back the clearest and sharpest pictures of what's up in space. And as Kylie Stanton explains, some Canadians played a key role in making it possible.
More than a century ago, this technology opened up the universe and opened people's minds.
1918 was when it was completed.
Scientists have been pushing the limits of what's possible ever since.
Here we go.
With the release of these pictures said to be worth 1,000 words, they've been left almost speechless.
Kid in a candy shop is the way that I feel right now. I'm honestly amazed that it works because it's such a complex piece of equipment and so much has gone into it over so very many years.
Canadian scientists can take some of the credit. Two critical components of the $10 billion James Webb telescope were developed at the Herzberg Institute of Astrophysics in Saanich. The fine guidance sensor allows the telescope to find and focus on objects, while the near-infrared imager and slitless spectrograph helps to study the object it finds.
So it's like you being in Toronto and you're blinking at me and I can see it in Montreal. It is that accurate that our instrument has to work.
And lift off. The whole process has been a practice in patience. The telescope was launched on Christmas Day, beginning its 1.5 million kilometer trip into space.
James Webb now has its array out.
Nearly 7 months later, what it captured along the way finally revealed.
There's just so much going on here. It's so beautiful.
But the real payoff is yet to come. Canada will receive a guaranteed share of Webb's observation time, 450 hours for scientists here to study the data collected over the next 2 years.
One big project will be to look at the early universe. We're going to look at galaxy clusters, and also we want to study exoplanet atmospheres.
But it's the sense of renewed wonder that may have the most lasting impact as we move through this century and beyond.
It provides the excitement, the interest, the hope that people need to carry on. I think the real benefit is in the eyes of the people that learn from it.
Kylie Stanton, Global News, Victoria.
Hot shot. Next, the Indigenous golf champion blazing a trail. A woman from the Tsutena Nation in Alberta is making a name for herself in the golf world. Irene Crowchild is a two-time national long drive champion, and she's going for her third title. Getting to the top, though, hasn't been easy. Heather Yurex-West looks at Crowchild's journey from residential schools and her hopes her success drives reconciliation forward.
Her love of golf came later in life. At 16, she learned this was something she could do. And at 26, she found she could be the best.
For me, it's just like a surreal moment. I remember in 2018, when they told me that I won, I just cried.
It was Crowchild's first of 2 national championship titles. On the golf range, her swing is a thing of beauty. You know that ball is going far. But the Dene woman from Tsuut'ina Nation, south of Calgary, has come a long way too.
I didn't know how to cope with like my own childhood and like my own childhood trauma, which like I fell into addictions. It just got to a point where I just like fell off the deep end.
Crowchild was raised by her grandmother, a survivor of Canada's residential school system. Trauma that was passed down through the generations until she says it became too much to bear. After 6 years struggling with addiction, Crowchild tried to take her own life.
It was a wake-up call. I talked to my drug and alcohol counselor. Like, I just told him, like, where's the papers? Because I can't keep living like this. I'm not going to be here if I don't change.
It was reconnecting with her Indigenous roots that Crowchild says ultimately saved her life. She's now 5.5 years sober and ready for her biggest year in the sport yet, with an eye on a 3rd national title before heading to the World Championship later this year in Japan. But her biggest accomplishment to date is being here at all.
As an Indigenous Two-Spirit woman, I do feel a lot of pride out on the golf course because an individual like me is not seen.
And while Crowchild doesn't think of herself as a role model, she knows to her community her achievements mean a lot. And so she drives again and again, working to make the sport she loves more inclusive and accessible while showing that after trauma, there can be success. Heather Urex West, Global News, Calgary.
And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Your Canada is this old train bridge in Chittick Lake, Saskatchewan. Thanks for watching. Tracy Tong will be at the anchor desk tomorrow. Have a great night.